So I already know that Christians are not going to like this video and are going to have all kinds of things to say about it, along with my flat earthers. But the gentleman asks a very good question. And this is one of those questions that many Christians try to utilize to prove that God exists, because God has to exist in order for there to be complexity within the universe, complexity of the human body. And how could such complexities ever come about without an intelligent designer? Now, to infer that there was an intelligent designer is merely just a God of the gaps kind of mentality that, well, since we don't know fully how these things have happened, we don't factually know every aspect of it, it must be God. That has to be the way that everything came into existence and everything has its complexities. But let me start with this. When you look at a planet like Mars, we know that Mars has grooves in it that appear to be ancient rivers and streams. We see these types of things on Earth. So when we view Mars, we assume that Mars used to have water within its atmosphere, used to have on its planet, on the planet face, and that it used to have rivers and lakes and oceans and things of that nature. Since what we see similar here on Earth, we can see on Mars. So how did that complexity ever come to Mars? And the fact that Mars now doesn't have any kind of life that we know of, then the creation of Mars by an intelligent designer is a great waste of space. We look at the moon, we see that the moon has many craters and have many elements and things of that nature, just like Mars has many elements and other things of that nature, but there's no life on it. Great waste of space. Venus has a misty atmosphere, very humid, clouds, acid, has boiling pools of different acids and different things of that nature. All that complexity exists on Venus, but yet Venus is devoid of life. The sun is filled with complexity, but it gives off light, which is necessary in order for life to happen, but also gives off a radiation that without a protection of an atmosphere, a planet like Mercury is devoid of life because it doesn't have a sustainable atmosphere being that close to the sun. So therefore, it's a great waste of space. All the nebulas and everything that we see out there that are complex in different gases, different elements, no life. Great waste of space. Comets flying through the air, meteorite bombardments hitting the Earth and other planets. Great waste of space. The complexity of Jupiter. Great waste of space. No life on it. Why is there a design for it if it serves no purpose, as far as we are supposed to be the pinnacle of God's creation, man, and yet all these things are created throughout the universe, throughout all these different galaxies. For what purpose does the galaxy of Andromeda serve for us here on Earth? It would be a great waste of space. So if there was an intelligent designer, then he was just making shit just for the sake of making things that serve no purpose that we are aware of, and does not serve any purpose that serves us here on this planet. So it would be a great waste of space and time to create all those things, unless of course there's other life on other planets and it somehow helps them out. But just in our own solar system, we see Neptune has all this water and on it, and this ice, and it's a great waste of space. So does Uranus and the moon Titan. Great waste of space. Great waste of design, of intelligence. But yet, all these things are incredibly complex. The universe in itself complex. Our life, us humans, complex. Now, what we can see is that when you have atoms and molecules, they become attracted to one another, and when they combine, they create a little bit more complexity than what they were before. So when you have hydrogen and oxygen, and those molecules are attracted to each other, and you have two oxygen molecules, and two oxygen atoms and a hydrogen atom come together, those two create the complexity of water because they were attracted to each other in order to create that complexity. We don't necessarily know all the forces. I don't necessarily know all the forces that causes these atoms to be attracted to one another. whether it has something to do with the number of neutrons, protons, and electrons, and it's attracted to other molecules of that has something similar about them that attracts them, but they are attracted to one another and they become complex. And then you have when new things are introduced into an environment, it becomes a more complex environment. Let me use a simple term, a simple way. The agricultural department inspect ships and things of that nature to make sure other animals aren't introduced or other fruits or insects aren't introduced into certain ecosystems, simply because it would disrupt that ecosystem. That ecosystem is working perfectly fine. But the moment you introduce something like rats coming into a place that didn't have rats, all of a sudden it adds complexity to the ecosystem, but it is disastrous to the ecosystem. There is when rats were introduced to Hawaii, for instance, rats became such a nuisance that it killed off and destroyed many bird species that now don't exist because it was added to that environment. So it became a more complex environment. That is more on a matter scale to which we're dealing with now. But I want you to think about that as far as how life continues to adapt throughout our known universe, but also throughout our known history. The more something is introduced to another thing, that thing has the possibility of becoming more complex. So whatever life was on the planet 2 billion years ago, as new elements, from whether it's asteroids or comets or just the movement of the oceans and elements moving around, the changing of the weather going from ice ages to warm climates, all those things, all those introductions and meetups created more complexity in every environment. And in every environment where that complexity changes, then adaptation happens. And whatever life was in existence 1 billion years ago has consistently adapted to those changes, and therefore, in most cases, they became more complex. You see, you do not need an intelligent designer to create complexity. Since matter and energy can neither be created nor destroyed, then as matter transmute itself into different environments, different levels of complexity begin to arise simply because of the introduction of those things, and it all happens by happenstance. On a video I recently did, I mentioned how between October and December we go through the debris of an asteroid, and we have meteorites that fall constantly. If one the size of Texas, or even just not even the size of Texas, if one a mile long were to hit the Earth, it would create an environment where almost everything on the planet will die. But for those things that survive, over the next 10,000 years, their adaptation will change the complexity that they already have into something that is even more complex to deal with this new environment. So therefore, we know that the Earth is billions of years old. It has had plenty of opportunities to have new things introduced to it over those billions of years, and therefore complexity happens. I'm not saying that everything came from a single cell organism. I'm not there yet. But I don't know how man came about, how the animals, how the plants came about in its original state. What was that first thing that happened billions of years ago? But what we can see is how adaptation has occurred throughout the last few hundred thousands of years, and therefore we know that everything on the planet adapts to new climates, to integrations of new things, and therefore it is logical to think that further back complexity has happened because of introduction of new things into our environment on the earth. You don't have to have an intelligent designer, but if there is one, it created a bunch of stuff that seems to be a waste of space. So y'all have a great day. And remember always, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.